Today I want to talk about Deku and Yuji, My Hero Academia, and Jujutsu Kaisen respectively. I'm going to spoil both of the series, all of My Hero Academia, and then up to the current chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, which is about 266, because I want to talk about something that I found really interesting, especially given how the series is treating Yuji wanting to save Megumi versus how Deku wants to save Shigaraki and kind of the differing implications of that. I have some notes, but I'm largely just going to ramble because I want to. So, for starters, to me, the easiest way to put this is there's the scene at the beginning of The Incredibles where the guy's trying to jump off a building, and when he doesn't get to finish that because Mr. Incredible, he's like, oh, Mr. Incredible didn't want to be saved. And to me, I think that's a pretty good dichotomy of like how the two series treat it, whereas My Hero Academia is kind of the Mr. Incredible here, where it's like, you looked like you wanted to be saved, basically being the core ethos of Deku's whole fight against Shigaraki, where it's like, oh, this guy's jumping off a building, clearly he wants to be saved. Whereas with Yuji, it's more like, do you want to be saved? Like, I can't force that upon you, you have to want that. And it's an interesting thing because My Hero Academia is all about like saving people. It's these people who, that as the series says, looked like they needed saving, which is entirely an assessment by the character who is doing that thinking. Whereas like Deku thinks Shigaraki needs to be saved because he sees some scared child underneath the huge big villain. He sees some good in them and wants to save them. Whereas with Yuji, it's a much more realistic version of that, where it's, especially, I think to me, the clearest one was like, I guess I have no right to tell you how to live, Fushiguro, or the most recent chapter, that quote, where it's understanding that this is what made him this way. Like, he's been through a lot. He's just been thrown through the ringer, hasn't had a great life. And it's like, I can't tell you how to live your life. I can't say you look like you needed saving because that's not necessarily what you want. It's a thing that's interesting, but it's ultimately coded under the fact that Yuji just misses his friend. The most recent chapters have been Yuji kind of understanding how he fits into the world around him and how other people feel pain and all of that. But ultimately, the point is that Yuji misses Fushiguro. That's basically the end all be all of it. Is even if he logically understands that, buddy, you've been through enough and maybe you don't want to keep going, like, he just still wants his friend to come back to him. He ultimately still wants to save him. And I think there's the interesting balance there, because even if he logically understands, he still has some of that desire to save, even if it's much more selfish than the one in My Hero Academia, where it's a lot more of like, you looked like you needed saving versus I want to save you because you are my friend. And even if that is just my selfish desire, I still want to do it. And I think that's such an interesting balance to strike between two series, because ultimately My Hero Academia is a superhero story. Like, the whole point is that they just are the guys who go out and save people. Whereas Jujutsu Kaisen is very much not that. There have been enough people dead to us. This is not a story about saving people. It's about beating the bad guy and how that happens through it. And I think the most recent couple chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen have really hammered home this like desire to save, but it's ultimately like, I want to win because I want my friend back. And Yuji's like, I'll take back Sukuna if it means my friend can live. And I think that's such an interesting balance to me, that it's really just fun to see how these two characters from very different stories approach the idea of like saving someone. Whereas Deku's is more like altruistic, where he's like, I think you need to be saved, and is kind of forcing that judgment onto the person. Whereas Yuji's is, I want to save you. There's more like ownership of it for personal reasons, which really speaks to both of them as characters, where Deku's like, I want to be All Might. I want to be the symbol of peace. I want to be the superhero. Whereas Yuji is just a guy. He is just a cog. And ultimately, what he wants to do is save his friend. But if you get to the core of it, both of them are, to some extent, similar concepts, albeit done in very different ways, because both are saving a guy possessed by an evil thing, whereas Shigaraki is more of like All for One is attempting to possess him, but a lot of it is like the fight between the child Shigaraki, who just kind of had his life ruined in like 30 seconds and then got manipulated by All for One into becoming this huge evil bad guy, versus Fushiguro, who kind of just got it up on him and now has the biggest bad guy in him and is kind of just given up on it all. And ultimately, Yuji and Deku just want to rid the evil, whereas Deku just wants to kind of purge it, but keep the good in him. Where Yuji's more like, I just want Sukuna to get out of my pal. I'll take him back. We're good on that one, but he's got to go. Ultimately, I think both are a good kind of metric for like that lesson of helping someone out, like wanting to save someone, even if it's not like a grandiose sense, where it's like you can have both the altruistic and the kind of selfish desires. You can want to save someone because it looks like they need to be saved. That is a thing you are allowed to do, but you can also be like, I want to help my friend because they're in trouble. Those are things that can coexist and ultimately could coexist in the same series. But for Jujutsu Kaisen and My Hero Academia, they've chosen to lean on more of each individual idea as a separate entity, because there really are no like superheroes in Jujutsu Kaisen. They're all kind of just guys who are little fighters who are just trying to kill Sukuna because everybody's trying to do that. That's really all for this. I just kind of thought this was a neat little thing, and sometimes it's fun to do a little analysis on a series and compare it with something else. And if you get this far and you're complaining that, oh, you think this is worse than this, I like both of these series a lot. I'm not trying to pit one against each other. I am merely using the two as a means to compare and contrast and do some good old analysis. My opinion on the series doesn't really matter. I clearly like both of them enough to talk about them positively. If you had asked me to pick one over the other, it's hard to say because Jujutsu Kaisen isn't over yet. But I like My Hero Academia a lot, and I don't know what Gege is going to do in the last 5 chapters, but I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, let me know what you think about this whole dynamic. I think it's pretty neat. Do you have any opinions on the ending of JJK? I have no idea what this man is going to cook up. I thought we had like a volume or 2 left. But if we got 5 chapters, there's going to be a lot happening. And I'm excited. I'm very curious what Shonen Jump's going to look like in the next couple months. But we're getting Hunter x Hunter back, so I do not care. I will be eating good for potentially a couple months. And that's all I want.